Good morning. Today is November the 4th, Monday. Oh my goodness, it's the first Monday of November. Speaking of the first Monday of November, it is actually the day before Election Day. And this being the case, this morning we are going to be discussing this election. We're going to be discussing how Christians are to think about voting. We're not going to tell you who to vote for. But we will discuss this election. We'll discuss why Christians should vote as a review, maybe have a foundation on that, and talk about some of the topics that are going around in this particular election. Before we begin, Pastor Eugene, I wanted to talk about beards. I know that you had a theory about beards, and what was it?
It's not a theory. This is fact.
Oh, this is no longer a theory. This is law.
No, this is studies. If you have a beard, you could take a punch better than someone that does not have a beard.
That's just cushioning. That's not.
Yeah. I mean, I think the study was done, I forget the exact number, but someone with a full beard, partial beard, no beard, when the no beard face was punched 100%, there was a broken jaw. And then you go all the way to full beard, it was like 45% of the time.
I would love a beard. How do you get one of those? Like, how do you, because the way that my lineage is set up, we are not known for that. So
Asians are in a different category.
Okay.
A lot of Asian men cannot grow beards. So you can't grow a full beard. I happen to be in that category as well. But then Asians, there's a different theory for Asians.
Oh, what's the theory? Is this a theory or like a law?
It's a theory.
Okay.
I mean, it's like if you trace back your lineage to royalty, you won't have full beards.
How come in all those kung fu movies? How do I get that though? Like, I know that my lineage dictates that I do not, but like,
so Brian has this tool that you can use on your face.
like a razor?
No.
Oh.
Derma roller is what he has, and you can borrow that from him. It's kind of gross if you both use it though.
Wait, so I'll just buy my own, but what is it?
It pokes holes in your face. Yeah.
Wait, so it pokes holes for what purpose? Like when when a farmer goes through the land and just plows it?
It's supposed to encourage
It stimulates
hair
your
growth.
follicles.
Yeah. Don't do it on your head though.
Wait, why?
I don't know.
I have to. My hairline is receding like the tide. So if you have any other, I guess, tips or know-hows for those of us that have beards, please let me know.
It's nice to have a beard, especially since the Crusades are coming up.
So we'll be talking about the Crusades in a couple weeks. Because I think there is this like view that Crusades were terrible. Like, oh, how could you do this? But was it terrible? Was it not terrible? We're going to find out. But yeah, if you have any tips on beards, please let me know. Other than if it's like grow it, then that doesn't help me in the slightest. So I don't want the little, so there are some growing pains, I think, with beards. Like you have to get through the weird fuzz stage. And then I think you're in the clear, but I can't get past that fuzz stage.
That's why they have No Shave November. Just don't do it for a month and see what it looks like.
Should we try?
There's no we. You could try.
That's like a we thing.
It's not a we thing.
Thank you for that, Pastor Gene. You are listening to, I didn't even realize that we didn't start the podcast. You were listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang, and we have with us Pastor Eugene and the crew all here today. Spurgeon, great beard, great preacher.
Yes. Calvin, not Luther.
No, that's why maybe he's consubstantiation, maybe. Who knows? But I do have to say though, every single person that has a beard, once they shave it, are never, ever as handsome. That's a fact.
Yeah.
That's a scientific fact.
Look at JD Vance.
Him without a beard is a little tough. The beard helps. Like, think about Gandalf without a beard.
Yeah, you need a beard.
Today we are talking about the election. It is November the 4th, which means election day is tomorrow. I think some people may have already early voted. That's what it's called, right? Early voting?
Yeah, there's early, there's mail-in, and then there's in-person.
Yes, there's different methods, if you will.
In Jersey.
In Jersey, right. Different pathways, if you will. But for the majority of us who will be going to the polls on Tuesday, tomorrow, November the 5th, we thought this might be a helpful episode just to kind of talk about what this election means and how, as Christians, we are to think about what we are to think about as we vote for this presidential election. And not only the presidential one, but we're actually going to be talking about the Senate as well, especially here in New Jersey. There is an interesting Senate race that's happening, and I think it's an interesting one for us to discuss. So we'll be talking about that as well. So I thought it would be interesting. Not interesting. Also important if we kind of started from the bottom. And I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I thought it might be a good review for us to think about why should Christians vote. We talked about that Arizona Christian University poll that said, I think it was 34 million. I think it was 32 or 34. You might have to fact check me on that one. Million people, Christians, evangelicals, that will not be voting this cycle. And so I think it's an important reminder for us to talk about why we have to vote. So in the Bible, the Bible isn't clear on voting. The Bible speaks of a monarchy, and within a monarchy, the citizens have no other responsibility other than to obey the king and pay taxes to the king, right? There's no selection process. There's no voting process. Citizens had no hand in that, really. So where in the Bible does it instruct us that we should vote?
Nowhere.
Yep, that's true.
This is Justin Martyr's case where he would say Christians are probably your best citizens because they will go out of their way to obey the laws and the rules of government. And so this is something that we want to do as a good citizen of the United States. You want to be able to be an informed voter. So that's why we inform ourselves with news site, with, watching or listening or reading the news, and then also, podcasts or going on social media and whatever people do now. I think most news now is like consumed by social media. I think YouTube said it was like 25% of all young people consuming news get it from YouTube.
From YouTube? Oh, wow, really?
So YouTube holds a big portion of that as well. So I don't think people turn on the TV and look for the 6 o'clock news anymore. They'll just look for the snippets that they see on their social media, or they'll go on YouTube to get a larger portion. If you go to Instagram, you'll see shorts or something like that, or stories, shorts on Facebook.
Yeah. Shorts are crazy. That's how they get you.
Is it Facebook that's shorts?
No, I think it's YouTube Shorts.
YouTube Shorts. What does Facebook have now?
They do like a story, like Instagram type of situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have all these things. So that's how a lot of younger people get their news. Older people still watch the top three, CNN, Fox, and MSNBC. I just don't think younger people do as much now.
Yeah.
And so, that's what it is. And your study is 32 million. 32 million of Christians are not likely to vote this cycle.
So there is, I think, a thought in Reformed Christianity where Christians are not to meddle in the world's affairs. So we are to be neutral. We know that the secular world and the kingdom of heaven is separate, and so we want to make clear distinguishing lines. If people want to come into our churches and hear the gospel, great. If they want to be changed by the gospel, great. But we're not going to be going out of our way to change the culture. The Lord is king, and so therefore it doesn't matter whether we vote or not. We're just going to obey God and obey the worldly leader as long as we're not going against God in obeying this leader. And so there's this view that we just want to live our lives as quiet Christians, not get involved in anything outside of the church. is that an accurate or good way of thinking? Because people might think, this voting thing, this presidential election, it's all about, it's secular. Neither of them are Christian. Sure, one party may be more Christian, in quotes, than the other, but neither of them are Christian. I'm going to just focus on church.
Yeah, we did a lot of, topics that can kind of address this from different angles. Brian is like a one kingdom guy.
All dancers tend to be, because they want to transform the world and dance.
So he's like a Kuiper, kind of guy. He wants to transform society according to his post-millennial views.
Like one move at a time. Yeah.
And so since he doesn't have a mic, he can't defend himself. So this is just truth now. This is what he is.
I mean, he does dance, and he does like Christian dances. I don't know how does a dance become Christian, though?
I think if you move your arms in a certain way, you do one of these jams, and then boom, you're a Christian dancer.
I think that's true.
Yeah. Dude, every single body motion I see these days has one of these.
Yeah, it's coming back.
I don't know what that's about. But anyway, so I think the Amish think like this.
Yeah.
They don't really partake or participate in secular affairs. Mm-hmm. They want to stay in their, enclaves of whatever they have. So there are people that think like this. I don't think that's for the vast majority of Christians, though. I think some Christians have been bamboozled, or they start to think that we don't have to, be involved in worldly affairs only when it is a convenience to them or an inconvenience. So it depends on the convenience level. But, would you wear a MAGA hat? Would you put a Kamala poster on your wall and things like that? A lot of Christians would be like, well, not really, that kind of thing. And so I think people want to, they have a tendency to step away from politics because politics can get dirty. But this is an impossibility is what we're trying to say. Politics, policy, they're all involved. And if you have a duty as a citizen to be part of that policy making process, then we should fulfill that duty well. We should be informed. We should do the best we can to influence, let's say, our current laws that govern us. Should someone go to jail for praying silently outside an abortion clinic? Should they?
No. That's kind of a crazy thing.
That's a crazy thing, but that's happening in the UK.
Yeah.
That's literally happening in the UK right now.
Yeah.
So if you pray silently outside of an abortion clinic across the street, you get sentenced to years in jail.
That's tough.
These are things that are happening. Christians are not being involved in the process. They think, let me not get involved. Of course, there are varying degrees, right? You could say you want to take over the government, or you want to step aside and support people in government, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. I think that's up for debate, right? Whether we're Kuiperian or we're two kingdom, I think you could get that up to debate. Whether it's somewhere around the middle, and that's fine with me. I don't think people can necessarily label what they are, but they do think in a certain way.
Yeah.
So some people are more, avidly political than others. Some people are more involved than others. Other people would just want to kind of stay back. I think for the vast majority of Christians in our culture today, they want to stay back.
Yeah.
And so they'll listen to a podcast like ours and they'll say, oh, that's very political. But we haven't endorsed one candidate or not. We haven't said you have to vote for this one candidate. But we are talking about the policies that they're proposing or a non-policy that they're proposing. Like they're not talking about this issue or that issue. We could talk about that. And then we could see, how we can be informed. Because whether you vote or not, and voting is, I think, one of the more ultimate ways that we can express how we feel in our country. But whether you vote or not, you still want to be informed. You don't want to be ignorant of the things that are going around you, right? And so that's something that we would definitely push up against. If you don't want to vote because you just want to stay out of politics, well, the real question then is, you're going to be consuming something. Because I know a lot of people that have said, I don't want to be involved in politics, but I listen to them talk, and they have been influenced by CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. They have been influenced by those things because those are the things, whether we know it or not, our political bubble has become so big, in the Venn diagram that we talked about, that is now encompassing everything in life. One person once said that, when you have a healthy society is when you don't know who the Secretary of Defense is, when you don't know the press secretary's name, when you don't know the chief of staff's name, that's when you know you're in a healthy place. You may know the president's name, but that's it, and then you just can move on with your life. Because why do you want to constantly talk about, KJP? Like now, if I say KJP, most people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
How does this person go by the initials and is this famous or infamous, right? Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. How do we know those names and things like that? And so why is that a healthy thing that we know these people when the real healthy thing is they are still working so well that I don't have to know their names, right?
Yeah.
It's when they don't work well, when they are so poor at their jobs that we start to know their names. I mean, obviously the other extreme is true. When they are so exceptional, we know their names. But we definitely know that's not the case for KJP or Lloyd Austin. And so we don't recognize them for their exceptionalism. And so how is that the case, How do we know the vice president's name? That's amazing, because in a very healthy society, you wouldn't know the vice president's name. Like, tell me the vice president of any president before, let's say, George W. Bush. Does anybody know? Does anybody remember? Things like that. Do you know Clinton's vice president's name? You should.
Was it John Kerry?
And it's Al Gore.
Oh, Al Gore. Oh, climate guy. I watched the documentary. I was changed.
When he lost, he put all his effort, money, and time into doing the whole climate change thing.
His documentary changed my life.
Inconvenient truth, right? And the people are crying about polar bears.
Yeah.
And now there are more polar bears than ever. People are crying about, the glaciers just melting. And now there's more ice in the North Pole than ever, things like that. And so do we hold them to account, or do you still remember that one documentary?
Yeah.
So we haven't gone to climate change. Maybe we will.
Polar bears are like
the biblical view on climate changes, but and things like that. When people become famous, I think that's when we should start to, consider, is this a red flag in our society? And I think for the most part it is. And so why do we know all these people's names? So before Clinton was George H.W. Bush. Who was his vice president? Before that, we know Ronald Reagan's vice president was George Bush because he became president.
Yeah.
But if I just ask, I would think the nominal person who was who was Ronald Reagan's vice president, people wouldn't know until I would say George H.W.
Yeah.
What about Jimmy Carter? Who was his vice president? Things like that. And so
he was a peanut farmer, I think. Yeah, I think so.
And so those are things that you would kind of see, like, why do we know these people's names? Is it because they're exceptionalism, or is it because the opposite? Because they are so poor at their jobs. And so those are things that start to stand out to you.
Yeah.
I don't know if people really register that, but it does. That's how I see it. So if someone's really famous, like who was the press secretary of this president, it's like, why does that even matter? Why does this person have to have a face and a name? Because they are supposed to be the face of the president. Who cares about who this person is?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But then now we've made it like that. I don't think people knew the Supreme Court justices' names at all until modern day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Who are these people? And then you just started to make them famous, with trying to bork people. This is something that our current president is proud to have done. Kind of stifling or hindering the Supreme Court nominee process, And so obviously with Anita Hill and all these famous congressional hearings, we now know about that, about, our SCOTUSes. But before that, who were our SCOTUSes? People didn't really care because they wanted to live their lives. They wanted to farm or go to work. And, they would vote for the person that would help them in making sure that they took home a bigger paycheck, but they didn't think it was life and death.
Yeah.
I guess there are some exceptions in history in times of war and things of that nature.
So polar bears are actually the most dangerous bear. I don't know if you knew that.
supposedly.
Yeah.
But not the one that Duke Godfrey fought.
That wasn't the polar bear, though. I think that was brown bear at best.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to beat a brown bear either, but I'm just saying it wasn't like a, yeah. Anyway. So a Christian should vote. I guess the question is, and again, this is just review. The question is, how should a Christian vote, right? I'm not even talking about this election in particular, but I'm wondering, I've heard that a Christian should vote according to his or her Christian conscience, which is based on the word of God.
Yeah.
But what if our Christian conscience leads us not to vote? So for example, I know in the previous election, a lot of people did not want to vote for Trump. It's not that they wanted to vote for Biden either, but they hated Trump more than they liked Biden. And so they just didn't vote, or they voted a third party. And that was just kind of that. Because their conscience wouldn't let them vote for who they thought was a bigot. And they didn't like the Democratic platform. Yeah. So how does that work? You know, what if our conscience leads us to not vote? What if our conscience leads us to vote to the third way, the third option? You know,
I mean, as a pastor, I don't want to bind anyone's consciences to vote for a particular candidate.
Right.
So that's me. But, you know, obviously when we don't endorse anybody in our church, it doesn't mean that the two candidates are still equal. They're not on equal grounds. I don't know if you know who Calvin Robinson is. He's very popular. These days he did that little debate in Oxford, or is it Cambridge, right? Those Cambridge debates, right? And so Calvin Robinson is a well-known guy. He's obviously not a Protestant. He is Anglican. But this is what he says. He said, Jesus Christ might not be on the ballot box, but a Jezebel is.
Oh.
And so everybody is like, oh, Jesus Christ is not on the ballot. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Jesus Christ is not on the ballot. We're not here to vote for Jesus Christ. And I don't think anybody really believes that. And so when people start to deride Trump's character and things of that nature, you know, I think they still come with valid points, you know. He was divorced twice. This is his third marriage. Although his third marriage obviously lasted more than 20 years, right? Something like that, around 20 years, because Barron Trump, his youngest kid is in college, I believe, right? I don't know exactly. Or high school, college. He's at least 18 or something like that. And so
18.
He's 18. So around 20 years, at least they've been married. And so, you know, you kind of have to measure a person's character with all the information that you have. And so those are things that, you know, you would take into consideration. And I think that's what people have done. People see the news cycle, and you see how popular Trump became when he was running for president. And now we know, like, I could just say something and people automatically know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When, you know, you hear the phrase, Trump said, I can grab them by the blank. Everybody knows what we're talking about because that became so famous. It became so popular.
Right.
And so why is that so popular? You know, you would start to think, don't other people say worse things? You know, people have said stuff. I'm sure they have regretted.
Yeah.
They've said things that they've regretted.
Yeah.
This goes in line with, you know, what I firmly believe about how to speak. When you speak, you have to be very careful. And this is a side note too, but when you speak, you have to be very careful because once it's out, it's different from when it's in. I get it that you can think that, you know, Sam is blankety blank. Sam is a blankety blank. You can think that. But once you let it out, there's no retracting that. And it does damage. And so once it comes out of your mouth, it's a rough place to be in. And so be very careful about how you speak about your neighbor, your brother or sister in Christ, your pastor, or if you're a pastor, be very careful about how you speak about your congregant or member, because once it comes out, it's hard to retract that. And so if you think that you could lift it up to the Lord, it's like, why am I feeling this way about Sam? I get so angry, disappointed, all these things. And so once it comes out, and so now, you know, we are in this social media world where everybody has not just a say, but has to say something. I don't think that's a positive thing. I think if you can stay quiet, you should. And if you can listen to someone, you should listen to them. You should listen to other people more than you speak. But now money and influence, is all about what you say, what you post, how you post the things like that. That's what we want to train our young people to do. That's a bad thing, in my opinion. And so be very careful about how you speak. It will last a long time. So even in this podcast, if people wanted to get after us, they definitely could, especially with the ones that David edited. Those are almost like raw footage of you speaking.
Not me. I don't really say much, to be honest with you. I'm not really.
Wait. Let's take another sidebar. Since this is more like a freestyle episode, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So you said something about actors the other week.
No, that. I think
you
David
got
took
some
that
hate out of that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you got some hate after that because you shouldn't be talking bad about people. Actors are people too, Sam. Actors are people too. They have feelings. They have souls.
They're snakes, though.
Yeah.
No, like snaky people.
Snaky?
Yeah.
Not sneaky,
serpentine.
Snaky.
Yeah.
They're serpent-like, so they're like the devil.
No.
Okay.
No, they're very snaky.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now it escapes me because there was somebody that said that, actors are the most gullible people because you have to be gullible to be a good actor. It's part of your psyche.
Right.
Exactly. It's in a book, The Psychology. I could look it up, but it is in a book.
Like, oh, maybe I really am Spider-Man. Maybe I should jump around like that.
No, but you have to be, hold on. I could kind of look for it.
I wanted to be an actor.
It's called The Psychopath Test by John Ronson. And he writes about actors' gullibility and how it contributes to their abilities. So here's a specific passage or a specific excerpt from that book. Actors are good at acting because they have no solid core. Now, this is not deriding them, okay? I'm trying to defend
what I said.
I'm trying to defend what Sam said and why people got mad. But this is from the Psychopath Test by John Ronson. Actors are good at acting because they have no solid core. They're forever taking on the qualities of the people they're with, which makes them wonderfully malleable, but also often easily manipulated. And so, this is what Ronson is saying. I think there's a lot of credence to that. To be honest, if you really want to be a good actor, you just have to convince yourself that you're this other person.
Right.
And that does mess with your core of who you are, because if you really have a solid core, it's hard for you to go away from that, right? So if you really are an honest person, can you lie? It's really difficult for you to do that.
Right.
That's why I really like socially awkward people. It's hard for them to assimilate because they have a core. But once they're in a familiar environment, man, they blossom, they open, and they excel. Look at geniuses, like Elon Musk, socially awkward, but in his field he excels.
Yeah,
and things like that. And so those are things that I keep in mind. And obviously, you don't want to deride actors just because you don't agree with them or something like that.
No.
But there is a semblance of truth. I want to take the sidebar because you did get some hate for it. I want to defend my co-host. Okay. This is why I like this is a complete sidebar from your original question, but this is why I like the movie Zoolander. That movie Zoolander is so...
It's good.
It's a parody, but it's so on the money in some of its concepts. Like when they had the whole fashion show called Derelict, it was so good because it's true.
Yeah.
Like you could literally wear a garbage bag on the fashion like catwalk and people will not know that you're just wearing garbage bags, which literally happened at a fashion event recently. This dude wore like a garbage bag and he walked out into the catwalk and no one said anything. No one said boo. No one was surprised. It was like, yeah, this is what it is. And so, parody, a good parody is mocking reality or showing reality. And Zoolander's main premise, I'm sure many people have seen already, Zoolander's main premise was he was saying that models are malleable, so malleable they can be manipulated into doing like secret government agent work and assassin because they're so fit as well.
Right.
They can do all these things. And so actors, that's what it is.
That was a tangent.
I don't know where that fit into anything.
Yeah, I don't know where we are right now.
You're talking about Christians voting.
Right, Christians voting. So we should vote according to our conscience.
Yeah, we don't want to necessarily, we don't want to necessarily bind a conscience to say you have to vote for one person,
right,
one particular candidate. But we can say Calvin Robinson, I think, is absolutely right. When we're talking about the Democratic nominee or the candidate right now for president, we're talking about someone who literally put people in prison for protesting outside of abortion clinics, was proud of it. And so if you're pro-life, you were put into prison under Kamala Harris's watch as AG in California, and you would be in prison for like 2, 3, multiple years. You know, you can't vote. You lose your citizenship after a year and a day. I think that's you could double check me on that one, but you can't vote. You lose your privileges when you're in jail. And so now you have all these pro-lifers who've been jailed under Kamala's watch, under her, bidding, and they can't vote anymore. That's a big deal. And so they can't vote for a pro-life president. And things like you keep on putting, you can't keep on putting your opponents in jail and expect people not to notice. But that's exactly what they're doing. And now she's projecting. She went on Shannon or whatever, that guy.
Shannon Sharp, Club Shay.
Yeah.
Really?
So he went on an interview with him and saying, you know what Trump's gonna do? Trump's gonna put all his political opponents in jail. And then you're just listening to this and you're like, that's exactly what you're doing now, and what you've been been doing. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now when you talk to people, they'll say things like, well, I'm not going to vote for the convicted felon.
Right.
That's really a talking point of people who are against Trump.
Yeah.
Because you have the opposing party that is literally putting their political opponents, people oppose their political views, in prison. And so those are astounding things that you should be informed of and aware of. And we want to point those things out. And you might be saying, well, then aren't you effectively endorsing a candidate? And then, the response that I would usually have is, no, I'm not. The point is, you can show how these candidates are imperfect, but one is far, far more sinister than the other one. And it's not the convicted felon. I'm sorry. It's not. If you continue to go down exactly what she did, exactly what her administration is currently doing, and you line it up with Christian principles, there is no equivocation here. Again, we talked about the three main things that a Christian should be concerned about, or may be concerned about, is the protection of the family unit, the protection of children, and their identity or something like that. Making sure they're not
brainwashed,
decapitated. Decapitated his head. Sorry, what am I talking about?
Castrated.
Because
I was like, wait, who's chopping off heads?
Castrated, or literally chopping off your reproductive organs.
Yeah.
And the third one, there's marriage, there's there's the transgender ideology, and then obviously the third one's the biggest one for me. It's the sanctity of life. If you can kill a baby in the womb, there is no stopping society from killing babies or people outside the womb.
Right.
We literally see that in Canada.
It's a slippery slope. Right.
We literally see that in Canada, where someone was like, you see stories like this all the time. You could just Google it. There's so much, Google can't even hide it. But there's so much now. Like, people are saying, oh, I asked because, I'm an amputee. I asked for the government, because they have universal health care. I asked the government to put one of those, chairs that go up the stairs.
Yeah, yeah.
I asked for one of those to be installed, and they responded saying, "Would you like to kill yourself?"
The assisted suicide
Yeah,
in Canada. Yep.
What?
Yep.
I just wanted to put that in. Instead of giving me something that I believe I need, you ask if I want to kill myself. That is crazy.
It's like a real thing. It's crazy.
It's crazy because that's where society goes to.
Yeah.
It goes to a place like that. And you need to understand how precious life is, because that's the job of the government. You hold the sword so you protect life. You hold the sword not so that you could kill it according to your own whims. Mm-hmm. You don't hold the sword to put your political opponents in jail and then go on Shannon Sharp or some other show and project what you're doing to your opponent. That is the craziest thing. That's literally what a 2-year-old or 3-year-old would do. And they would think, I did nothing wrong, you know? And so when you correct your kid, I think you corrected your kid, and then he's like, don't do that. And they go around. You know, I think this is a story that you told. When you would discipline your child, your kid who's not even 2 yet, right?
Yeah.
Will go outside, take her baby doll and discipline the baby doll.
Yeah, she does it everywhere. It's inside, outside, everywhere.
And so they don't know. They're literally doing what they think they want to do, and then they can blame you for it, whatever the case is. It's someone who does not understand why something is happening and then just projects. You project it onto, eventually the 1-2-year-old will get it. So you start to teach discipline. So this is why I'm doing this. I don't want you to do this anymore. This is why I'm doing this. I don't want you to. They don't get it in the beginning, but eventually your hope is that once they're 3, once they're 4, they get why you're disciplining them.
Yeah.
But when they're 1 and when they're 2, they don't get it. But when they're doing something wrong, especially if it's something that will harm them, like if they're trying to jump into, let's say, the rails of a subway station, you stop them and you discipline them. You cannot do this. You're stern with them. And then you do everything that you can to tell them this is wrong. But then they can go out and project it to someone else, right? This is exactly what we're seeing from just one party. They are projecting exactly what they did to the other candidate. To me, that is something that a 2-3-year-old does. This is not what an adult does. But if you've been convinced that this is, some serial philanderer who still grabs women by their blankety blank, and these are the bits that you have in your head, of course 32 million Christians cannot vote because this is what they have been informed by. So, those are things where we're like, I get it, where if you don't listen to the news or you only consume, let's say, the top 3 and you only get those sound bites, then this is what you think of them. And that's why when people listen to Joe Rogan's podcast with Donald Trump, I saw so many comments going, I thought Trump was an imbecile. And after listening to this, and then he has a good measure of understanding in so many a broad swath of topics, they were shocked. But obviously, again, if you didn't listen to the whole podcast and you only took the snippets out and you only listened to the snippets that are posted by, let's say, the top news media outlets, like New York Times or something like that, then you'll still think Trump is an idiot, right? So this is what I told people in our church. Try to listen to the speech without the pundits extrapolating on it. Just try to listen to, let's say, the State of the Union by itself and see what you think. Listen to the debates without anybody talking and giving you what it should mean.
Yeah.
Watch Joe Rogan's podcast with Donald Trump without listening to anything first, and then come up with your own, understanding. This is very similar to how I talk to you guys with commentaries. Don't read the commentary first. Read the passage. Let the passage sit. And then read the commentary later. And then so at the very end should be the commentary. So a lot of pastors will say, it's the last 10% of your study that you should read a commentary. But a lot of people use it as like the first 90% or even like the 50%. They do it way too early. Things like that. So let a passage sit with you. But that should be life. You should be informed enough or educated enough to make decisions about what you're watching. But now people don't do that. They just want the soundbite. So I don't want to watch a 3-hour thing. So give me the 5-minute thing I should take? Give me the 5-minute takeaway. So
Right.
they'll read the New York Times and they'll see like, oh, Trump is a bigot. It's like, if you watch the 3-hour thing, it's like, how'd you come away with that 3-hour thing? Oh, they edited a clip to make them look, make him look like this and some things like that. So those are the things that I kind of tell people. When you do that, you'll be shocked to see that the narrative that, let's say, a lot of these major news outlets are trying to give you versus what you have seen, there's a disparity between them. And so that's why a lot of people have gone away from, the big three and other, mainstream media outlets.
I think it'd be a good time then to, as you mentioned, talk about the candidates and just kind of maybe the details on this particular election. So again, election day is November the 5th, which is tomorrow. If you're listening to this on November the 4th, which is when this drops on Monday, it is Tuesday, November the 5th. Like we mentioned before, and I'm sure people know, the presidential election is between the candidates of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party being Donald Trump with J.D. Vance of Ohio as the vice president, and Kamala Harris from the Democrat Party with Tim Walz of Minnesota as her running mate. Interesting for just our New Jersey listeners, we also have within our ballot a New Jersey Senate vote for Andy Kim, who is a Democrat, and Curtis Bashaw, who is the Republican candidate for the New Jersey Senate. And so that is actually an interesting topic as well that we'll discuss in just a little bit. But the question really is, and we've been discussing this for months now. We've been discussing the Republican versus the Democratic platform. If you've listened to our podcast, we've kind of weaved bits and pieces into our episodes. The question is, though, can a true Christian vote Kamala? That's the question. And I know that we don't want to bind anyone's conscience. We don't want to do that. And we don't want to really tell people who to vote for, who not to vote for. But here's the...
I mean, the question itself can be very offensive to New York Metro people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But here is a study that was done by Pew Research. There was a poll that was conducted between the dates of August 26th and September 2nd of this year. 61% of Protestants said that they would vote for Trump if the election was today. And this is a survey of U.S. adults. But that still leaves 49% of Protestants. 39% of Protestants voting Democrat, voting
or not voting
Kamala Harris, or not voting.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess the question is also, are Christians voting for Kamala Harris in the first place? Why are they voting for Kamala Harris in the first place? And can a true Christian vote Kamala?
I think the understanding that some more, I would say, progressive Christians.
Yeah.
Look, I can't really paint with a broad brush on this topic alone because, okay, so New York City, we have to go back a little. New York City has been really influenced, especially, we're talking about Christians. New York City Christians have been really influenced by Redeemer Church. Redeemer Church is the biggest church in New York City. New York City's biggest church then was founded and followed their head pastor. Their head pastor was Timothy Keller. And so Tim Keller is a very, very influential figure. It's well known. It's no secret, I think, but I mean, obviously it wasn't publicized, but it's pretty well known among people that know that Tim Keller was a registered Democrat. And so people are like, Christians could be Democrat because look at this hero of ours who is also Democrat. Tim Keller really didn't, I don't think he would have, I don't know what he would have said on this election cycle because he wasn't involved in it because he passed away before. And so those are things that I keep in mind when I try to think of my New York City metropolitan friends who are Christian, who go to church, who don't like Donald Trump, okay? And then when we talk about pro-life, they have a different angle on it. So I try to listen to it. They'll say things like, under Democrat presidents, abortions have gone down. under Democrat presidents, abortions have gone down.
Statistically in the past.
Statistically. And we have the numbers and things like that. So they'll say things like that, which I'll be happy to address later. They'll also say things like, well, Trump is a fascist, so we won't vote for a fascist. But when we go back to pro-life stances, they'll say, well, I believe that abortion is wrong, but I believe that a woman should be able to make that choice and understand that abortion is wrong. The government shouldn't be involved in that. So they're convinced of that. And so I don't necessarily, see the argument from that angle, obviously, right? I think the government's there to protect life. You have the sword to protect life. And if you're killing babies in the womb, or you're allowing for it, or if you're even encouraging it, as we saw Margaret Sanger do with Planned Parenthood, if you're encouraging it, if the first go-to is when you have an issue, when you have a problem, you change the culture so that you make young women think that if you get an abortion in your life, if you don't get an abortion, if you have this child right now at your life, at your stage, your life will be ruined. If you've convinced young women of this, then you will think that abortion is good. You're saving young women from a disastrous future potentially. So get that abortion is what Planned Parenthood has now infused into our culture that a lot of young women believe. And so Christians who are now on this compassionate side will think, yeah. So I'm like, I can't do the broad paintbrush. I'm trying to do the spectrum here.
Okay.
So some Christians believe that you should be able to have an abortion. And I hate that whole word and euphemism, women's health care, abortion. It's murdering your baby. That's what it is. You are murdering the most innocent of society so that you could have your job, so that you could have your career, so that you could potentially become something.
What if someone were to say this, though? So I agree that it's not women's health care. I agree that it's murder. That's what it is, right? But someone could say, okay, well, those who want an abortion are going to get it anyway. So whether it's Harris in 2024, whether it's Trump in 2024, whoever wants to really get an abortion will do whatever they can to get an abortion. I mean, abortions existed before clinics existed, right? And so they're going to do that anyway. So take those people out, because they're going to get the abortion that they want anyway. Wouldn't you rather have an administration that isn't really characterized by dirty or bad character, right? They may pass a law that's more favorable for abortion, but they're not forcing you to get an abortion, right? And so shouldn't we have a leader that has good character, that has good standing, and they may pass a law, but as Christians, our responsibility then is to make sure that we're changing the hearts of the people that would want to get an abortion. Like that's our role, right? Versus bringing in a person that has a terrible character. Sure, he might limit abortion with laws, but people that want to get him are going to get him anyway. So isn't our responsibility as a Christian to vote in a more, I guess, better character leader and do our part in convincing our neighbors not to get an abortion and to respect and honor the sanctity of life?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of false things in that narrative. I think we just need to clear it up. Mm-hmm. So I love it that we could have a discussion about abortion. And I hope that among professing Christians that we could still have this conversation.
Yeah.
How important it is that we give women, especially pregnant women, all the health care that they need or require. Mm-hmm. They could get the DNC. They can, get everything that's needed if you have a miscarriage. You want to make sure that everything is expelled from your body before it starts to rot. But the fact of the matter is, because you ban abortion doesn't mean that women won't get the health care that they need. You just won't be able to kill your baby. But then there are people that say, well, they're going to kill their babies anyway.
Right.
So why not let them do it in a more safe environment? That's false. Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to just tell all the Christians out there that really believe that this is false. Women constantly die from getting abortions. They go into septic shock. There's all these things happening. They're just not reported by Planned Parenthood. There are deaths that happen because you couldn't get rid of the entire, baby, or the things that happen during pregnancy, you couldn't flush it all out.
Yeah.
It just constantly happens. So there are deaths that do happen because of abortion, even in places where they permit abortion. Okay. And here's another thing that people don't think about that I hope they do. Abortion has this this is why I hate the word abortion. Abortion has this connotation like a delete button, like it wasn't there before.
Yep.
So once I abort, it's like, oh, it just didn't happen.
Back to your life.
Yeah, you go back to your life. False. Once you murder a baby, you are never the same. I need you to understand this. If you decide to murder a baby, it doesn't matter if you take Plan B. It doesn't matter. Whatever abortifacient that you take, even if you go through a procedure after, whatever it is, it's never a reset. You don't reset your life once you have an abortion.
Yeah.
You are never the same. We know this even with our biological studies now. We've talked about this before. Let me just remind you again. There's something called microchimerism. And once you have a baby in your belly, the baby sends his or her DNA to all the organs of the mom. The mom will share that DNA with the baby for the rest of your life. The mom is forever changed if you have a baby.
Yep.
Don't you understand that once you are pregnant, you are a different person? Because now your body is like, I need to help this baby survive. You are now part of this process that you have been given by God to protect, to nurture and mature this baby. It doesn't happen only inside the womb, but also outside the womb. Look at moms that take care of their babies. Everything about them is about nurturing this baby. This is most grand things that a mom can do. And yet we have been convinced in our lives that this is a low thing. Don't just call me a baby maker as if it was a low thing. It's the grandest thing that you could do. Philosophers have been thinking about why men do the things that they do, because they will never be able to do as a great thing as making a baby. They will never. The inventions that we have, even today, with our egalitarian society, inventions today still 90% male. All the great feats that we have, the people that we remember, can never, ever come up to a woman making a baby. Because Alexander the Great, as great as he was, he had a mother. That mother produced him. That's something greater than Alexander the Great then. Those are things that men can never get away from. And so we're always thinking about how we can be great because of the greatness that women have. To look down on women because of whether you're a man or a woman, if you look down on a woman because they're quote unquote baby makers, is not to understand how precious life is. Now we have convinced our young women across the country, that making babies is not a good thing, not a great thing, is a bad thing. That's how insane and inversely we have come to a set of morals. To not understand that. You look at Genesis, how they praised, even Rebecca for going to Isaac. They praised her because she'll be the mother of nations. And so those are things that we want to keep in mind. Like, if you truly are a Christian, you should understand the sanctity of life, the value of life, how great life is, because that is what God has blessed this world with. He's blessed this world with life. Let there be life. So when we block that for whatever reason, we are going against what God has blessed us. We are inviting curses down on ourselves. And that's exactly what we see in our society. When Christians are now, even so-called Christians, I don't know what to call all of them, but professing Christians are now saying that abortion, there are cases where we should make exceptions and things like that. I don't know where that comes from. In what world would that be okay if you understand the value of life? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Life is a gift by God.
So I could see someone arguing, okay, I understand that. Harris is much more open and actually staunchly supportive of abortion.
That's her major platform.
Right.
So we don't know any of her policies. The average person doesn't know anything about her policies except that one. That's the biggest one. That's the one that she runs on. That's what she stands on. This is what she gets emotional about. She gets angry about.
She knows her policies.
But she gets angry about this. How dare, once Donald Trump becomes president, He's going to take away woman's right. Woman's right to what? To get an abortion. That's what she's talking about. A woman's right to kill her baby. Women do not have a right to kill their baby. No one has a right to kill your baby. No one. And so, in the end, it's not a woman's right. A woman doesn't go in there and kill the baby herself. She hires a hitman to do it. And one of the, it's ironic, it's sad. I think one of the Harris campaigns had like 12 abortion doctors up there.
Is that the one where someone was having a medical emergency?
Someone was having a medical emergency and they were looking for a doctor and everybody on stage just stood there.
They were looking, the people on stage who were doctors were looking for a doctor to take care of the medical emergency.
Yeah. That's the insanity of our society today. Abortion doctors aren't doctors. They're hitmen. They're killers.
So what if someone were to say, okay, me voting in Harris doesn't mean that I'm getting an abortion. I'm not getting an abortion. I'm just saying I want to vote in somebody that has better character. And sure, that law might be the law of the land at that time, but I'm not getting the abortion.
Yeah, I think this is like evangelicals for Harris or something like that. This is a side note. Maybe you could come back to it. This is why Meg Basham's book was so good. It was so timely for this period. Look who all these evangelicals for Harris or whatever it is, these evangelicals that are voting for the left, where they're getting funded by, where does money come from? It comes from people like George Soros, people on the left that hate Christians. It's so interesting. But, you're just like, oh, it's about me. Okay, look what Harris said. When she's on the campaign, she's doing these interviews. There was one interview, I can't remember exactly which one it is, but there was one interview where she was asked, what about Christians, who have a conscience that won't be able to do this? Will you allow exemptions for this? And in a nutshell, she said, no. What you are doing is you are going against a woman's right to have this abortion. You cannot deny this woman her healthcare rights.
So doctors, Christian doctors.
So if you're a nun, if you are in a Catholic hospital who is against abortion, which we have one in Jersey, by the way, or a few, I would say.
Yeah.
They are now compelled to carry out what this new administration is promising to bring in. Again, this is the major thing. So if you're talking about character here, character has to do with the fundamentals. We'll go back. If you're arguing about character, let's go back. Let's go back to what character means. Character means that you should be able to fulfill the promises that you say, right? Harris has gone back on everything that she has proposed in the beginning. And now she has changed her position on almost everything. All right, fine, that's political. You don't want to talk about it, that's fine. What about this one then? Character has to do with how well they will protect the life of the citizen in the United States of America. How much they will protect them. How much they will protect a Christian's right to believe what they believe. Harris is a 0 on that scale of 1 to 100. She's a 0. She will not protect the rights of Christians to freely express what they believe, what their conscience dictates.
Yeah.
I cannot believe a Christian can honestly think that when this person has come out and expressed this overtly, that she would not let a Christian follow through their convictions, especially when it comes to the sanctity of life, which is the most basic foundation of Christian beliefs. You go to Genesis 1, the first chapter of the Bible, you can't get away from the sanctity of life. You can't get away from that we are made in the image of God, male and female, he created them. So you can't get away from that. And so when you go away from that, it's not just a slippery slope to like abortion, it's a slippery slope to hell. That's what we're talking about. And so that's something that we want to continue to inform our listeners. This is a big thing. And you will come across people who are self-professing Christians who don't believe what I just said, who believe that it's a character issue and Donald Trump is the evil of all evils because he's this fascist. So they'll do this, this one-word derivatives for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And when you say he's nothing of those, I mean, he's not perfect. Obviously, he has some character issues, but he's not perfect. But he is an executive. And so if you say that, they'll be like, wow, they'll think you're crazy because all they have consumed for the last 10 years is these sound bites, these clips, 5-minute news articles, or you just read the title. why Trump is a Nazi or something like that. And so when you have been convinced fully in your mind and someone comes up to you with something that is completely outside of what you have been convinced is reality, it's a tough thing to have your reality shaken. So a lot of people will just reject that. And so, I don't know if people that listen to this podcast really are in the Kamala camp. I don't know. I don't think they could listen to beyond even 10 minutes of this podcast, even though we're not, endorsing a candidate. We are saying what is evil. And what Kamala has spewed from her mouth in her political campaigns, when she's out there on doing the stump speeches, when she's out there doing interviews, is evil. It's objectively evil. How can you support that? And if you're saying, the other candidate, so this is why we have 32 million Christians, you're saying, the other candidate is just equally evil, so I can't vote for either. And this is where I think we can have a back and forth to say they are not equal. You cannot equivocate someone who puts Christians in jail for their pro-life position to someone who doesn't, who actually accepts pro-life people under his tent. You can't equivocate those two.
So the biggest question that I had, I think, going into this episode was, why are evangelicals voting for Kamala? That was my biggest question as I was going into it and as I was researching and looking through different things. And so, like you said, there is an organization called Evangelicals for Harris. And so they have a website. It's evangelicalsforharris, I think, .com or .org. I don't quite remember at this point. But they list some things. They list some, results from Trump's presidency versus the results from the Biden-Harris presidency. And it's interesting. One of the biggest points for Evangelicals for Harris, they say, Evangelicals for Harris argue that Christian voters should be concerned about treating others with love and respect, and that Kamala Harris is a candidate who does that. Right? So again, it's a character thing. They talk about economic growth. They talk about jobs. They talk about manufacturing, healthcare, infrastructure, pandemic management. What is very interesting about this section in pandemic management is one of the reasons why Christians should not trust Trump is because he, and I quote, refused to wear a mask, a vital life-saving measure, and disparaged those who did because it would reveal he wore makeup. That's interesting.
I think they're referring back to the time where he got over COVID. He went back, and then all the news anchors are saying, "Look how he ripped off his mask." I mean, he just took off his mask to show his face to people. He was by himself.
Yep.
You see these sound bites, how they will, reframe and restructure some of the things that you look at.
Yeah.
And so it's insane how these things will stay with the soundbite, the image will stay with you. Like we talked about, the nominal person will see this, let's say in a debate, and they'll take one thing away or two things away, that kind of thing. They don't take like everything. You can't remember everything. It's really difficult to do that, and it's tiresome to do that.
And they talk about climate control, but it's very interesting. The way that they talk about climate control is they call it creation care, which is ironic because they support abortion. And so it's really interesting how even on this website, and there are a lot of different stats that they put out, but it seems very one-sided. And again, the biggest thing is character. How can we vote for somebody like this? And they actually even talk about Kamala Harris's faith journey. And this is what I quote. I quote here, this is from that page. While a deeply committed and faithful Christian, Vice President Harris has great respect for other faith traditions. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, and relatives in India took her to Hindu temples. She joins her husband, Doug Emhoff, in Jewish traditions and celebrations. This respect syncs with her Baptist tradition, which has a long and distinguished legacy of support and activism for religious liberty and the separation of church and state. Even in that little excerpt alone, there's a lot wrong with that. I don't think she's a deeply committed and faithful Christian. I don't think you can be a deeply committed and faithful Christian and support abortion. You just can't. Those two don't go together.
Yeah, for simplicity's purpose, you would think that this is what we try to get out what you believe about abortion, what you believe about life says everything about your character. You know, you cannot be perfect about everything, but what you say about life reflects your character. And so for, people like R.C. Sproul or all these people, they would say things like, I would rather vote for a communist than, someone who is pro-choice. And they went, now people are like, oh, you think R.C. Sproul will still think that? I don't know, man, he's not alive. I can't speak for him. But that's how important life is. Everything starts from life. All these mass murders, like these genocides, happen when you don't respect life. You can't mess with life. When you start messing with life, God will punish you. There's no doubt about it in my mind. And so when you're talking about character issue, we always want to start with what their view on life is. And I get it. When you look at this homepage or this, when you look at the page for Evangelicals for Harris and things like that, they'll talk about like peace, love, compassion, and they'll say, "Oh, she's the one of that." And obviously, Donald Trump's the opposite. Right. I don't know where they get this from. I don't see how Donald Trump is the opposite of peace when he's had like the most peaceful 4 years that any president in modern day had. I don't know where he gets love. If you look at Donald Trump's life, he actually gives money away, of his own money away to all these people. I don't know, the compassion. He like offers to pay for funeral services out of his own pocket that he meets on the road and things of that nature. There are so many stories. Obviously, the news media won't cover those stories. Then that's fine. They could cover whatever bias they want. I get it. But to call them objective is kind of silly. And so what has Harris done that is love, that is compassion, that is peaceful? I just think people are talking about rhetoric. Look at her rhetoric. It's so much more peaceful than Trump's.
Right.
And things like
Less
that.
Less aggressive.
Yeah, and so maybe that's a difference of opinion. And now we're going to opinion territory, but I don't think so. I don't think she's more loving or compassionate at all. I think she's an empty shell. And I think if you listen to 5 minutes of her speech, you can see what an empty shell she is. I don't think that she's anything beyond the lines that she's memorized. Anytime the word economy comes up, she always has to start with, I grew up in a middle-class family, because it's a line item that she memorized. And so she's just regurgitating lines. I don't know who she is at the core because she's never revealed it. Either she's an empty shell, like I said before, or she's really, really sinister and evil. And so I just don't think she's a good person. If I said that to you, and you are all in for Kamala Harris because you read this Evangelicals for Harris, what would you do? What would you do? And I didn't talk about Trump at all on this one.
Nope.
You'd have to go to Trump. That's what I think. I think you'd have to go to Trump and start deriding Trump. And so you're just saying then, the real question for a lot of these people, it will boil down to who's the lesser of two evils. And so you have this whole media narrative and this push from all these agencies to try to show that Trump is the greater evil. That's all it is now. Trump is the greater evil because Harris has no positive quality. No one follows Harris. No one buys a Harris hat, things like that. And so those are things that you would start to think like, oh, I see. So the lesser of two evils, I'm convinced now, is Kamala Harris. So I'm gonna vote for Kamala. That's what it is.
But the thing is, Pastor Eugene, his character sucks, and so like character as a voter, I have no control. I can't push his character. However, with a person's platform, as a voter, I can pressure the candidate to change their platform. I mean, look what Trump did. People, during the first debate, evangelicals were saying that Trump wasn't as strong against abortion as he should have been, or as he kind of portrayed himself to be. So obviously, voters are changing his stance on abortion. As a voter, I can't change his character. I can't change the fact that he's a philanderer, but I can change was or right.
Unless you're saying once you are always a philanderer. I don't know.
I mean, which is also another discussion, I think. Yeah. But I could try to change Kamala's platform. I could do something about that. But Trump's character, I can't do anything about. Shouldn't I vote in somebody that I can change to be more quote unquote Christian rather than somebody that's kind of a lost cause already?
Yeah.
No, I was being an actor there.
You have no core.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And so, I think one of the platitudes that evangelicals get convinced are things like, who loves their neighbor more?
Oh.
Who helps the poor more?
Yeah.
And things of that nature. Who puts more money into the poor? And these are discussions that are, who helps the immigrant, right? Who helps the immigrant? Obviously not Trump, it's got to be. And so these are things that I always hear. I'm going to vote for Democrats because they will help the poor more. And, my pushback is always the same. It'll always go back to the basic foundation of what life is, who is the least and the most vulnerable among us. And those are the poor. Those are the poor. And who's being killed. When the Bible talks about, even in Leviticus, about how not to sleep with some people, like you can't sleep with your sister, your mother, all these things, goes down the list. At the end of that passage in Leviticus, it talks about you can't give in to Moloch. It was just a thing. You could just say the word Moloch, and people knew exactly what it was. Yeah. Maybe you read it now.
Yeah.
People are like, who the heck, what was this about? This seems so random. You can't just give in to idol. No, Moloch was the sacrifice of children. It always happens when there's sexual immorality. It's tied in Leviticus. Yeah. When there's sexual immorality, you give in to Moloch. When there's sexual immorality, that's when you wonder, what do I do with this baby?
Yep.
Yeah, because it was birthed out of iniquity. It was birthed out of sin, not because of, a marriage union.
Yeah.
And so those are things like people always have to wonder about because of sexual immorality, all these things come out. But then if you give in to Moloch, that's a deeper sin. That's what Leviticus is pointing to. You can't say that you love your neighbor when you continue to promote sexual immorality, when you continue to promote baby murder, when you can't say that you need to be neighborly, this person is helping the poor, when you dump money into programs that just help bureaucrats. People are getting wise to this. People are getting wise to this. And now we are seeing these places where we supposedly dump money into, they're getting worse by the day. People are not getting out of poverty because they are dumping money into it. In fact, people are waking up into saying, now we're seeing these interviews because people are going on the ground to these places, these cities that are really terrible. They're like, we keep on voting these guys in and they are making our places worse.
Yeah.
They are not helping. Money is going in. What has that money done? It hasn't done anything. And so what I see more often is wasted resources. We don't see people that are actually helping out the poor, but they're helping themselves. We are seeing more nonprofits that are getting government grants, and these CEOs of these nonprofits are getting paid six figures. Why are you getting paid six figures if you're a CEO of a soup kitchen, a food bank? I don't understand that. Why do you think you deserve six figures? This is the insanity of people's rationalizing and reasoning now. I'm going to help the poor, but I better be rich out of this. And this is what they believe. They believe that they deserve it. I have this moral high ground, so you better pay me the big bucks. I get it. Some CEOs of nonprofits could get paid six figures. I get it. But I don't see why. I don't see how. How are you getting paid six figures? And when I'm talking about six figures, I'm talking about $100,000. I'm talking about like $200K, $300K, $400K. I don't understand that. How is that possible? Because they're getting paid by government funds. So their own boards are voting these salaries in when they are supposed to go to, helping the poor, things of that nature. Now I get it with inflation. 100K is not a lot. That's why I'm talking about like 400K, 500K. Why are they getting paid $500,000? That to me seems unreasonable, not rational at all. But that's where our government funding is going. We need checks on that. Who's checking them? Or are we just saying, oh, we've paid, $20 billion to help the poor? Where do I see that? Where do I see that actually happening? Do we see like societies, communities being changed because this money has been poured in? because I don't think it's about the money being poured in. I think it's about people responding to the gospel. It always has been. So let's say you're a quote unquote mission agency that's going to help the poor. Are you seeing lives being changed for Christ? Are you seeing baptisms? Are you seeing church growth? Are you seeing obedience happening in the membership of a church? Or are you just seeing people come in just to get fed? Because that's not how you measure growth or a change in society. I think that's just maintaining the status quo. Maintaining the status quo is not helping society. And in fact, now that you've maintained the status quo, it can't be maintained much longer because you don't have the foundation. What you see is a dip. You see a dip in church attendance. You see a dip in the people who give their lives to Christ. You see a dip in the morality of that community. And you see more crime increasing. And you see all these things happening. I think that's a tragedy that a lot of Christians believe that because I pour money or have these events or, do these community services that these communities are now changed. I don't think that's how communities changed. This is, if you're listening to for the first time, excuse me, you might be surprised that I'm saying this, but if you've been a long time listener, I don't think you'd be surprised. I am not a guy that really is a proponent of nonprofit agencies when it comes to, food banks and things like that. I don't think they've done a good. I think churches have been doing it traditionally, and now churches, when they have started to slowly step out, these other agencies came in. You can blame whatever you want to blame. I'm just telling you what is happening. And now churches don't go in at all. And now we rely on these para-ministries, these non-church entities to do that. And they have no accountability. They really don't get one church support. They have to have multiple churches come in and try to support their ministry. And so we have no fiscal accountability. We don't have moral accountability. We don't have anything oversight on what's going on. The church doesn't have any oversight. So who has the oversight here? Who has the oversight? I have no idea. And so is it any wonder then that there will be corruption infused within these agencies? And you see a moral decadence in these communities as a result, because those that were supposed to be the moral purveyors, these guys that were supposed to give good, meaning they're supposed to give the gospel as well as food, as well as clothing, they don't give the gospel. They barely give any food or clothing out. And the things that they do give out don't have any lasting impact. And so is it any wonder then that these communities are dying? They are not thriving as a result of these para-ministries or these government-funded agencies coming in. So, look, I don't think they're loving the neighbor. I don't think they're more compassionate. I think it's the opposite. I think if you think that voting for a system of government that pours money into, let's say, poor communities without oversight, without the proper oversight, is asking for calamity. And this is what I have seen in the last 4 years. It's calamity that we see, not just within our borders, but in the towns where this money is being funneled to. It's just worse. It's just getting worse. What about New York City, where they're giving these illegal migrants more money than poor citizens?
Yeah.
They're getting thousands and thousands of dollars in bank cards, and they're getting thousands and thousands of dollars of hotels. They can live in hotels that you can't even book a hotel in New York City now because, these legal migrants, but they're illegal because they entered illegally, have a priority over. That's just a upturning and a flipping of morals. That's what it is.
And I think just to even answer the first question that I'd asked in the thinking of I can push Kamala to change because I'm a voter, I would say that's very, very highly unlikely. Because I think the reason why Trump's stance changed a little bit or shifted a little bit was to garner more votes, right? And so you would expect the same thing from the Democrats. If Kamala really wanted your vote as a conservative evangelical, then she would have shifted her position a little bit, just to the middle, even a little bit. But that has not been the case. And so what you can expect is if Kamala goes into office, that her position will be locked in. That's her biggest thing. That's why she's getting voted in. So as a Christian,
she has said that she will get rid of the filibuster so that she could push through this abortion initiative that she has.
Yeah, and you might think, well,
to get rid of the filibuster to push this is sinister.
Yeah.
It's not just stupid; it's sinister. So you could be stupid and sinister, but this is sinister or both. You could be stupid or sinister or both, but this is sinister in the very least. To abolish the filibuster so that you could push in this initiative so that anybody can get abortion, and everybody has to give the abortion if a woman wants it.
Yep.
That's evil.
As a Christian, you won't change that. As a Christian voter, you won't change that. You won't influence Kamala to change that. And so I think we're starting on different grounds here. Whether Trump gets in or Kamala gets in, we're starting on completely different grounds here.
Well, if you really consider this and you really believe Donald Trump is a fascist, which I think is a reduction and it's a false claim, but that's my opinion. If you really are convinced that he's a fascist, then go down to what fascists and what communist dictators have always done. They get to control life. They get to kill people, not with due process, but on their own whim. That's where it all starts from. Abortion is one of them. Look, if you degrade what life is, you are evil. That's what it is. This is where all evil dictators, fascists, and communist leaders, they all started from. It's when you take away the sanctity of life. When you say this group of people, they're just like dogs. They're monkeys or whatever it is. This is what Hitler called the Jews, right? And so when you do things like that, that's when you start. When you don't take human beings as human beings, that's where it starts. That's why Christians should ferociously fight for life, inside the womb, outside the womb. Just because you're old doesn't mean that you should get killed. That's what it is.
No.
There should be no assisted suicide because you're elderly. That's insanity.
That's ridiculous.
And you should not be able to kill the baby in the womb.
No.
No matter what the means of conception or the reason for conception was. And so whatever the origin of conception is, it's still a new life. That life is not your own life. It's someone else's life.
It's kind of crazy because what you said really goes deep into the psyche or like the brain of the mother. I think whenever you get an abortion, if you think that your life is clean afterwards, that will and has never, ever, 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 ever been the case. Ever.
Never will be. If you are a mother that has an abortion, that has had an abortion, you're never the same. There is restitution, there is forgiveness, but only in Jesus Christ.
Right,
That's where the gospel comes in. Like a murderer can find redemption and forgiveness in Christ too. That's how powerful Christ's blood is, because that's how evil murder is. But to deny murder is denying the true reality of what things are.
So, I guess in slowly coming to a close for this episode, we just talked about why a Christian should vote, how a Christian should vote, and the different things that we are to consider specifically in this election. Like we said before, there are groups like Evangelicals for Harris, meaning that there may be Christians even near us that are not going to be voting the same way that we vote. How can we as Christians be charitable to people who vote differently from us?
So as a pastor, I do believe that not everyone votes the same way in our church.
Yeah.
And so you really don't want to alienate anybody. Everyone is in a different place of, faith journey.
Right.
Some are more mature than others. And, some are still on milk. Some are on meat. Hopefully.
Carnivore.
I don't know about carnivore, but some are on meat. And so as a pastor, you want to make sure everyone is in the fold. So you continue to minister to them. This election is not the end of your Christian life. It could be the end of the country. Well, I mean, that's a different story. But even if the U.S. is disintegrated, it doesn't mean that Christ is not king anymore. Christ will always be king. In the end, people voted in Hitler. Over 95%, I believe, was the margin that he won by. So those are things that we continue to see. People won't always make the right decision, but we can continue to prayerfully look at our, in hindsight, see our mistakes and move forward. Maybe later on, people will see, oh, this was a mistake to think that abortion wasn't as big as it was. As someone that is, pro-life, I want to get to a place in our society where abortion is unthinkable. And when we look back into a time when we had abortion, we'll look back in horror saying, I can't believe we thought like this. I can't believe we thought that taking an innocent baby and chopping up its limbs was ever okay, ever okay. I want us to get to a point, this is what I hope for. I can't believe we voted in, or we could ever think about casting a vote for someone that thought along those lines.
Yeah.
And so those are things that I hope that we can get to. But in the end, we still want to minister to those people, regardless of what they believe, because in the end, we want to show that Christ is King. But that also doesn't mean that we compromise on what the views of the Bible is, or what the Bible shows us what our view should be. Things like not just the sanctity of life, the sanctity of the family, how precious children are, and how you're not supposed to mutilate their body or allow for that ever to happen. So that we should help foster their growth, not deter it, and things of that nature. So all these ideologies that are coming in that are anti-Christian, we want to push against that. So this is something that our podcast hopefully does and our church does, is we want to stand firm on the ground that we have been given in the scriptures. And so if you want to debate some of this stuff, we always welcome it. I don't want to call anybody, like even an evangelical for Harris, I wouldn't want to call them by a derivative or something derogatory. I would want to have a conversation with them. I wouldn't say something, if I knew you were a Harris voter, I wouldn't necessarily go, well, you're not a Christian. And that would not be my first take on it. I would just try to listen why. And they would probably point out the things that you saw on the website. And then I would say, well, this is a bigger issue as a Christian. I believe these are the major issues. And this is how I can see the issues that you brought up with love, compassion, those general issues with these major issues. So that's how I would probably go about it. And if other people have different means that they would do so, I think my whole thing is, I want to win people over. I don't want to necessarily separate and divide. So I always want to win people over. This is why R.C. Sproul was so great. You say he was Winston because he won people over. He saw someone like John MacArthur who did not stand with him on everything, but he won him over. Except for the baptism thing, he won him over on almost everything else, right? And so that's how, to me, that attests to the greatness of R.C. Sproul. And so, a lot of our young guys that listen to this can be in the middle of cage stage or a little post-cage stage or pre-cage stage. I don't know if cage stage really is helpful in being winsome, especially among brothers and sisters. And so if they are a brother or sister or a professing Christian, I would say go about it in a more sensitive manner. It does take more patience. It does take more of a listening ear. And so you definitely want to develop that when you talk to someone that may not necessarily see it from the views that we have expressed here on this podcast.
So this is the last question, and it's kind of a fun exercise. And, for those of us that do not live in New Jersey, I think this is still a good question for you to listen to kind of consider, because this might be in your state next. But in New Jersey, the New Jersey senator race is between the Democrat Andy Kim and the Republican Curtis Bashaw. And so, we've been talking about the different parties' platforms and their views on abortion. So Andy Kim, Democrat, we know that this is a pro-abortion platform. Curtis Bashaw, Republican, is not a pro-abortion platform. However, Curtis Bashaw is a practicing LGBTQ member. Is that a correct term? He's gay. Practicing. And he would be the first Republican LGBTQ senator. And you know, it's tough for the Christian to kind of think, okay, what do I do here? And it almost feels like the same thing, where it's a character thing versus a platform thing. Whereas in this one, the character is this person's identity and can lead to anti-Christian platforms for later on, right? I mean, the way that he is going to be a senator. And so I'm curious, how do we vote on this one? Because this one is a little bit tougher. Andy Kim, Democrat, pro-abortion. Curtis Bashaw, Republican, anti-abortion, yet pro-LGBTQ.
I don't know if he's anti-abortion, actually. Yeah, he's not anti-abortion.
Well, his party would be.
Yeah, he is not anti-abortion. So he ran on the platform of, I guess you could pretty much say that he's okay with abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So both candidates are not pro-life. They're pro-abortion.
Yeah.
We could safely say that.
Yeah.
And so one candidate happens to be a Korean guy, and since you're Korean, you understand how excited this might make Koreans to have a Korean senator.
I have a friend named Andrew Kim as well, so kind of works out. Is it him? Is it not? It's probably not, but is it him? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, Andy Kim is running for Senate, and he is going to take the place of the disgraced Bob Menendez, who, you know, I believe he's been convicted. Yeah, so he's been taking bribes from the Egypt government for like the longest time. He had gold bars from Egypt.
Gold bars
in his,
are nice
pockets,
to hear. Yeah.
In his jacket pockets. He was found with a ton of money. His wife was in on it and everything. So he was disgraced and he was kicked out.
Yeah.
He couldn't run again. So he wasn't kicked out. He couldn't run again. And so to take his place is this man named Andy Kim. He's a Korean, so it gets Koreans all excited. Oh, I get to vote a Korean guy in. Yeah.
One of us.
He happens to be a Democrat, though.
Yeah.
And now the Republican is Curtis Bashaw, you said. Pro-life and pro-choice, and he's gay.
Yeah.
See, nothing about that is Christian. So definitely not a Christian guy. And so who do you vote for then?
Right.
You vote for the Korean, even though he is a Democrat and stands for everything the Democrats stand for. His platform is something like anti-corruption. I'm for small businesses and things like that. So people are like, oh, yeah, he's for small businesses. All our Koreans are for small businesses to help the Korean community out.
Right.
And then, you know, there's Curtis Bashaw, who's like, well, I'm for fiscal responsibility. You know, she is socially liberal, economically, fiscally conservative.
Yeah.
So he's one of those guys. And so he's running for Senate. So you're trying to consider which one do I vote for. I just want to offer up another thing is that if you vote for a Democrat like Andy Kim, he will caucus with the Democrats 100%. So that means if they do go in, let's say Kamala wins, and then she's like, I'm going to get rid of the filibuster and it's going to go down to a pure Senate majority vote, then Andy Kim will 100% vote with the Democrats.
Oh, yeah.
He will caucus with the Democrats. Yeah. Curtis Bashaw. Kurt. Is it Kurt Bashaw?
No, I just made that up. I feel like he would go by Kurt, though.
No, it's Curtis Bashaw. He will most likely caucus with the Republican Party. Okay?
Yeah.
And so those are things that you will have to take into consideration. I think Curtis Bashaw really just wanted to take a more moderate stance.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to come out as a moderate Republican. So that's his view. He's an outsider. I don't know if he's getting a lot of money from the Republican Party, from the GOP, because you don't see any of his signs anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if he'll win or if he has any chance of winning. And so there are party loyalists. So if you're a Republican, you'll probably vote for Curtis Bashaw. If you're a Democrat, you'll probably vote for Andy Kim. So I think it'll come down to party lines because I don't think these two offer much. I don't think they're stars in any way.
Yeah.
And so I don't think their notoriety or popularity will have anything to do with who votes for them. I think people will just vote for either one of them according to party lines. So if you're a Republican, you'll probably vote for Bashaw.
Yeah.
If you're a Democrat, you'll probably vote for Kim.
And I'm going to correct myself. I didn't mean to say that the Republicans are anti-abortion, but they're just less pro-abortion than Democrats generally, is what I meant.
Less pro-abortion.
So
less
they're
pro-choice.
Right. They're more pro-life generally than Democrats is what I meant to say.
Well, they're just less pro-choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Andrew Kim, he doesn't talk about pro-life positions because most Koreans are pro-life.
Right.
They're socially conservative.
Right,
So
right.
He doesn't mention that, but I'm telling you that he will be caucusing with the Democrats 100%. And so those are things that people keep in line. Yeah.
I wanted to just mention that because, I don't want people to be shocked when they go to the polls and like, oh, what is the senator one? I don't know who these people are. And so a little bit of background for those two.
No, I had a question like that. And I said, yeah, it's something that we could address on our podcast because our church is in New Jersey.
Right.
I think this is more the case with the New Jersey Senate race than it is with the presidential race where you just don't have a good candidate.
Yeah.
I think the presidential race is way more clearer than the New Jersey one.
Yeah.
And so in New Jersey, it's less clear. And so you probably want to make your best judgment on it when both are not pro-life, when both are pro-LGBTQ, unfortunately. And, one calls themselves moderate and the other one doesn't want to state their social views. They just want to talk about like business and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because they believe that that's what, like Andy Kim cannot lose the Korean vote. That would be a shame. So he'll just say what Koreans will probably think about, which is small businesses.
Yeah.
And so he'll run his platform on that.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. By the time that we release the next episode, a new president will have been elected. So
yeah, I mean, by the time that some people listen to this,
maybe actually,
it would have been elected, right?
Yeah.
We'll find out.
So,
unless something happens, civil war happens, then I just want to let you know that you know what side we'll be standing on.
The North. Well, because we are there. Just geographically speaking, if you will.
So hold on to your Bibles and your guns.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that was what Obama said. These bitter clingers to their guns and their Bibles. But
that's me.
Yeah, you are a bitter clinger to your guns.
No. I'm not a bitter clinger. I'm just a clinger, though.
But whatever the outcome is, whether you're sad or you're overjoyed, we'll say that God is King. He reigns over all.
Yep.
Jesus still sits on the throne.
Yep.
And we want to be obedient to our ultimate King.
Amen. Thank you for that. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we'll be discussing church leadership. We discussed country leadership today, but the next week is church leadership. That's a fun little segue there. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. That was a good segue, though.
It was great.
Okay. Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith. Peace.